Subscribe or I'll come over there and do it for you. This case takes place in the USA in the year 2002. And buckle up as well, because this is a really weird one. This is the case of Dr. O.C. Smith, otherwise known as the man in the barbed wire mask. Dr. Smith was born in 1952 in the USA. To say that this man is interesting would be an understatement. At one point he was a Navy captain and was present in multiple military operations, including in Desert Storm. One person would later say that he was a very interesting man, and that there were even stories about him being a mercenary. Following his work in the military, he served as the chief medical examiner for Shelby County, Tennessee, and he built a reputation as a hard-working, hands-on forensic pathologist. His colleagues admired his hard work and dedication to his profession. He was known to rush out to crime scenes at all hours of the night. Whatever the job required, he would always do, and he worked on some of the city's biggest cases. Dr. Smith was incredibly well respected, and his expertise made him a sought-after expert in court. He often testified in high-profile murder cases, explaining complex forensic findings in plain language for the jury, helping to bring many people to justice. Although saying this, he wasn't without controversy. Some colleagues privately remarked that he reaches in his findings, and by doing this, he could have upset some dangerous people. And there was one case in particular that could have sparked what was to come. Dr. Smith became involved in the case of Philip Workman, a Tennessee death row inmate. Philip had been convicted of killing a Memphis police officer during a robbery back in 1981, and by the early 2000s, the case had gained traction amongst anti-death penalty activists. Philip Workman insisted that he never shot the police officer. He claimed that the policeman was accidentally killed by a fellow police officer's bullet. The bullet that killed the officer was mysteriously never found, leaving the case to be somewhat controversial, and this is where Dr. Smith came into the picture. In 2001, Philip Workman attempted to plead his innocence, and an investigation was launched. Dr. Smith performed a new forensic technique to analyze the evidence. He used an electron microscope to examine skin samples from the officer who was killed. In his findings, Dr. Smith claimed to find tiny flakes of aluminium in the officer's wounds. This linked Philip to the murder, as the officers didn't have this kind of ammunition. However, following this, Dr. Smith was criticized. One of the leading pathologists said that the tests he conducted didn't meet peer-reviewed standards, and they shouldn't have been accepted. People began to believe that Dr. Smith did this to keep Philip Workman on death row. After all, Dr. Smith was openly incredibly pro-police, and many of Philip Workman's supporters believe that he had sent an innocent man to his death. And so, Dr. Smith began receiving some rather disturbing mail in the post. In one letter, the writer called Dr. Smith's work evil, and proclaimed God is calling upon him to act. Others called Dr. Smith a killer, and a soulless demon, accusing him of lying in his testimony about the Workman case. This of course made Dr. Smith rather anxious, worried for his safety, and rightly so. The police began looking into the matter. However, it wasn't really taken too seriously, or at least, I couldn't really find too much info on the investigation of the letters at first. One investigator, however, did note that the letters seemed to have a religious theme to them. God and the devil would often be referenced. But in March of 2002, the police began looking into this a little more seriously. Late one night, a security guard discovered a crudely built bomb and a Molotov cocktail. These were left outside the Shelby County Regional Forensic Center, the county morgue where Dr. Smith worked. The makeshift bomb was found in the very same rear stairwell that Dr. Smith often used. The bomb was accompanied by another letter, again making threats against Dr. Smith's life. Thankfully, no one was hurt, and the bomb was defused. With this, the police began to conduct regular paroles around the area, hoping to maybe catch someone in the act next time. But Dr. Smith, he seemed to just carry on with his life like normal, which made people he worked with wonder, how could he be so brave, or maybe stupid? And now we arrive to the night it all happened. In the early hours of the 2nd of June 2002, a security guard who worked near the centre noticed something strange. Dr. Smith's car was still parked outside, well past midnight. This was unusual, especially given the latest happenings. The doctor would work late, but not this late. Concerned, the guard decided to check up on the doctor to make sure that all was well, but all wasn't well. The guard cautiously approached the building. He could hear someone shouting for help inside. He opened the door and walked inside the building. He then turned to the stairwell. The guard looked in horror as he found Dr. Smith handcuffed to a window guard, wrapped in barbed wire, with a motion-sensitive bomb strapped to his throat. Horrified, the guard immediately called the authorities, and within minutes, the police and bomb squad arrived on the scene. Dr. Smith was freed, and the bomb was deactivated. He was then transported to the hospital, where he was treated for some minor injuries, cuts and bruises, along with some chemical burns to his face and body. After getting patched up, the doctor was asked exactly what had happened to him, and this is what he said. On the 1st of June 2002, Dr. Smith had been working late at the forensic centre as he often did. Sometime shortly after 10 p.m, he locked up and headed out the back door into the dark stairwell leading to the exit. It's at this point that Dr. Smith then claimed that a shadowy figure jumped out from the darkness and began attacking him. Dr. Smith said that whoever this mysterious attacker was, he was around 6 feet tall and 200 pounds. As Dr. Smith turned to look at the attacker threw chemical liquid straight into his face. He said the chemical burned like fire, and he was even able to instantly recognize the searing pain of lye. Lye is a strong chemical that is capable of causing burns to a person's skin. Dr. Smith then stumbled in pain. He was blinded and in immense pain as the chemical had made its way into his eyes. The attacker then splashed his face again with the chemical, causing further burns. Instinctively, Dr. Smith raised his hands to his eyes in pain as the mysterious attacker began beating him, leading to Dr. Smith falling to the ground. This unknown man then pulled out coils of barbed wire and began wrapping the jagged metal around the doctor's body and head. By this point, he was so overwhelmed with pain that he could do little to stop his attacker from doing as he pleased. Then, according to Dr. Smith, this mysterious attacker dragged him back up the steps. The stairwell had a metal security gate over a window, and he was forced upright against it. The attacker then produced a pair of handcuffs and padlocks. His arms were then spread apart and locked high up to the bars, while his feet were tied together below, resembling a crucified man. As Dr. Smith was helplessly bound, the mysterious man went and retrieved a small homemade bomb. The bomb was about the size of a can of soda, and he superglued it to the doctor's neck. On one side of the bomb it said, "Steel in the hands of the King of Kings." On the other side of the device were inscribed the letters JMJ, which likely meant Jesus, Mary, Joseph. The attacker then spoke to Dr. Smith. He said the words, "Push it, pull it, twist it, and you die. Welcome to death row." The attacker then informed him that the bomb was motion sensitive. One wrong move could detonate the bomb. As suddenly as this mysterious man had appeared, he left, leaving Dr. Smith beaten, burned and bound, and literally booby-trapped. Terrified and alone, he basically waited to die. Dr. Smith later said at that moment he didn't care about anything else except for not moving a single muscle. Knowing the bomb was motion sensitive, he tried his very best to remain still, breathing as little as possible and as shallow as possible. If he struggled, the bomb could detonate. If he did nothing, it could have a timer, and he could have blown up at any time. All he could do was wait. After some time passed, he began making some noise, hoping that someone would come. And around midnight, roughly 2 hours after the strange attack, the security officer who happened to be patrolling found the doctor. When saving him, the bomb squad bravely put their lives at risk. One of them held the bomb to keep it stable, essentially holding it in his hands while the others cut the wires. One mistake, and everyone could have died. Thankfully, Everyone was safe in the end. After the bomb was taken care of, Dr. Smith was taken away in an ambulance to the hospital. The paramedics were rather shocked, not only by the attack, but by how his injuries were relatively minor. He had some chemical burns on his face, along with some red irritated eyes from the chemicals, and he had some scratches from the wire. But he had no deep slashes. In fact, he hadn't even lost much blood. One paramedic would later say, "For all the brutal restraint, there wasn't any blood that night. Even a cat scratch would draw blood, yet Dr. Smith was hardly bleeding at all." This paramedic found this to be suspicious. The police then interviewed him about the series of events where he gave the account I just described. Now, as you can imagine, news of this attack spread rapidly. A respected doctor, bound in barbed wire, with a bomb strapped to his throat. This kind of thing is usually only found in crime books, but this was real life. Newspapers' front page shared the story of Dr. Smith, the man in the barbed wire mask. The police issued warnings. Locals became worried. A madman willing to do such a thing was now on the loose, and no one knew if he would ever strike again. But the real question was, who was this mysterious attacker? After the attack, Dr. Smith basically hid away and denied all interviews. He became deeply worried for his safety. He bought a guard dog and carried a firearm at all times. Due to the horrifying nature of the crime, the police needed to find this attacker, and they needed to find him fast. Time was very much of the essence. Would he strike again? No one knew. A multi-agency task force was created to find the mystery man. Federal ATF agents, FBI, and local police joined forces and treated the case as a top priority. Investigators quickly connected the dots between the barbed wire attack, the staircase bomb, and the letters that had been sent to the doctor. The pattern suggested someone with a religious background and someone who was upset about the role Dr. Smith played in the controversial cop killer case of Philip Workman. And because of this, Philip Workman was even questioned. Maybe he had something to do with the attack. Maybe he had people on the outside who would have carried out this attack on his behalf. Whilst on death row, Philip was questioned, but he denied any involvement and even went as far as saying that he might be getting framed himself. He believed that this attack was set up to ruin support for him. Philip then told the investigators to explain step by step exactly what happened to Dr. Smith, or at least what Dr. Smith claimed to have happened. Upon hearing the story, Philip sat there puzzled. He told the investigators firmly again that he had nothing to do with the attack. But then he told the investigators something strange. He told them that the story seemed far-fetched and that maybe they should investigate Dr. Smith and not him. Philip believed that Dr. Smith had done this to himself. However, the police dismissed Philip's theory, and instead they turned to Philip Workman's family members, known friends, and other death penalty activists in the region. Despite extensive interviews and even surveillance, no solid evidence or suspect emerged from those leads. And with this, to the police's surprise, Philip was ruled out as a suspect in orchestrating the attack. Although there was still plenty of other cases to go off. Dr. Smith had worked with hundreds of high-profile cases, and investigators began looking into possible leads. But none of those leads led anywhere, and the case was going nowhere. As months went by, the case increasingly baffled investigators. Nothing made any sense. The police created some kind of profile. Someone who was incredibly determined, capable of devising complicated plots, and oddly fixated on biblical metaphors and symbolism. Yet, despite a 15-month investigation following the attack, with over 100 possible leads pursued, the investigators just couldn't find the man responsible. And as more things just didn't add up, the investigators began to wonder, was Philip Workman right all along? Was Dr. Smith actually capable of staging the whole attack? It's at this point that some of the team began looking into whether or not Dr. Smith could have done this himself. Right away, one thing stood out to the team of investigators. The elaborate nature of the crime seemed to be unusual for an outside assailant. An expert recreated the scene and noted how much equipment the mysterious attacker had to carry and deploy in the dark. The expert said, "This is an incredibly complex crime. This person is going to have to be standing out there in the middle of the night with all of this stuff. The attacker would have needed to lurk outside the morgue carrying a bottle of lye, lengths of barbed wire, padlocks, and a heavy chain and cable, not to mention a bomb. Would this really be possible? Also, whoever did this required insider knowledge of Dr. Smith's habits and the way in which he would exit the building. Investigators then noticed something else. How could someone wrap a struggling victim in barbed wire with zero significant injuries or bleeding? Also, Dr. Smith's eyes were irritated by the chemicals, but they were not permanently damaged. It was as if the chemicals had hit his face in a way that mostly avoided the eyeballs, like careful self-application. As they dug deeper, there were more and more inconsistencies. In his first statement, Dr. Smith said that his ankles were tied with the barbed wire first and then his wrists. But then later, during a more intense interrogation in 2003, his story subtly changed. He said that his hands were tied first. Under pressure, he seemed to be mixing up the details. Dr. Smith was also a military veteran with combat and mercenary experience. He was in good shape and was trained to handle stress. Yet, he described being completely overpowered by a single attacker. So the question was, why didn't he fight back? Well, he was actually asked this question. Dr. Smith responded that, "Machismo gets you killed. You have a choice. You can resist, or you can ride it out." But the police didn't buy this. They believed that he did this to himself. And so Dr. Smith was interviewed again. The police flatly told him that they believed he was lying and that he had staged the entire attack. Dr. Smith, for his part, stuck to his story. He theorized that he was being targeted because of the Philip Workman case, suggesting that some enraged person wanted revenge on him for his testimony. Dr. Smith tried to explain away these particular details. For example, when asked why the barbed wire hadn't cut him, he argued that it was old and rusty, so it would scratch him but not tear the skin. But this didn't matter. On the 11th of February 2004, Dr. Smith was charged with possessing an unregistered explosive device and with lying to federal investigators about the attack. They believed that Dr. Smith had faked absolutely everything. The story had made national headlines when Dr. Smith was the victim, and now it was making headlines again with an even more unbelievable twist. Dr. Smith was forced to step down from his position with great reluctance, and he complied. He stuck to his story and maintained that he was innocent. When addressing the media, he said, "I just never dreamed it would end like this." Dr. Smith was then offered a plea deal. No prison time if he would simply confess to staging the attack. For his charges, Dr. Smith was looking at up to 20 years in prison. However, for Dr. Smith, there was no chance. He said he was innocent, and he refused the plea deal. He told the media that he would never quit, and he would never sign that piece of paper. He lawyered up and prepared for the fight of his life in court. The stage was now set for one of the most bizarre legal showdowns in US legal history, the case of the man in the barbed wire mask. The trial began in 2005. Over the course of around 3 weeks, jurors heard testimony from nearly 60 witnesses. The prosecution claimed that Dr. Smith had staged the entire attack, although they did also admit that there was no single smoking gun piece of evidence, nothing concrete. Instead, they presented a puzzle made up of smaller pieces of evidence, all pointing towards an inside job. The minimal injuries inconsistent with a brutal attack, the inconsistencies in Dr. Smith's accounts, the extensive planning required, and the utter lack of any other viable suspect after a thorough investigation. The prosecution even demonstrated with a volunteer that it was indeed physically possible for someone to bind themselves with barbed wire and set up a scenario like Dr. Smith's. As far-fetched as it sounds, it could be done. But what could the motive possibly be? Well, an expert came forward and explained the concept of fictitious disorder, a psychological condition where a person fakes trauma or illness to get attention or sympathy. The most well-known form is Munchausen syndrome, where a patient secretly makes themselves sick just to receive care. The prosecutors claimed that Dr. Smith orchestrated the attack to paint himself as a victim hero, similar to the recent case of Jussie Smollett. The prosecution also claimed that Dr. Smith had a history of telling dramatic false stories. Apparently, Dr. Smith had told a story to his colleagues about serving in Africa where his family was massacred, a story that was completely untrue. Things weren't looking too good for him. But Dr. Smith's defense team portrayed him as a man wrongfully accused. They pointed out that he voluntarily spoke with investigators for hours, even without a lawyer present, because he believed in his own innocence. The defense claimed that a guilty person would have lawyered up and shut up. There was also a lack of evidence. There was no fingerprints on the bomb, no purchase history for barbed wire, and no receipts for the purchase of any chemicals. There was no eyewitnesses saying that they saw him set anything up. The case was entirely circumstantial. Dr. Smith's wife Marge spoke up, expressing that she believed her husband would never do such a thing. The defense also raised the question, why would anyone superglue and then strap a live bomb to their throat? After 3 weeks of testimony, the jury deliberated on Dr. Smith's case. Dr. Smith was incredibly worried. He told the media, "When I listened to the closing arguments of the prosecution, I'd have voted myself guilty." The jurors deliberated for some time. Then finally, there was a decision. The jurors were split. 3 of the 12 jurors had voted guilty, and the other 9 were not convinced enough to convict. Some of those 9 believed that Smith was likely guilty, but felt the evidence left too much doubt. Others perhaps believed that he was innocent outright, and a few were even reportedly angry, feeling the prosecution had wasted their time without a definitive case. And so with this, the judge declared a mistrial due to the hung jury. Dr. Smith was neither convicted nor exonerated. He was, in legal terms, still innocent until proven guilty. But what do the experts think? Well, officially, law enforcement considers the case solved. They believe Dr. Smith carried out a hoax, while Dr. Smith's supporters consider him to be an innocent man who was tragically misjudged. In their eyes, the real perpetrator was never caught. Dr. Smith continued to deny any wrongdoing to the end of his days. He passed away in 2019. He never wavered in saying that a mysterious man that night attacked him. If it was a hoax, the true motive was only known to Dr. Smith, and with his passing, perhaps we will never know. Or maybe we will. Maybe one day this mystery man will be caught. The truth may never be known, but it continues to fascinate and confuse those who learn about it. Feel free to let me know what you think in the comments below, but either way, there's 2 options. Someone did this to him, or he did it to himself. Both are equally terrifying.